never stop reading the Bible. Today we are jumping right into one of the most foundational and honestly beautifully told stories ever, the first two chapters of the Gospel of Luke. We're going to walk through how this whole thing is set up, from these incredible promises and prophecies to a really humble, world-changing birth. Okay, let's get into it. So before the story even really begins, the author makes one thing crystal clear. This is not just a random collection of tales. Nope. This is a carefully researched, intentionally structured account, and it's written to a specific person so that he could be absolutely certain about the things he'd been taught. And that person's name is Theophilus. Now, we don't know a ton about him, but he's the reason we have this amazing, detailed narrative. The author is basically saying, hey, Theophilus, I've looked into everything right from the very beginning, and I'm laying it all out for you, step by step, in a clear, logical order. This just immediately grounds the story in historical detail and gives it a real sense of purpose. Okay, so let's jump into chapter 1 and see how this all starts to build. You can think of this chapter like a grand opening. It's signaling the end of an old era and the really dramatic start of something brand new. It is all about promises, these divine announcements that are about to change literally everything. The chapter just unrolls in this sequence of incredible events. First, an angel appears to an elderly priest named Zechariah and promises him a son, John. Then, that same angel visits a young woman named Mary with an even more mind-blowing promise. She is going to give birth to the Messiah. These two stories get woven together when Mary visits her relative Elizabeth, that's Zechariah's wife, which leads to this powerful moment of shared joy. It all leads up to the birth of John and a powerful prophecy from his very proud father. Now, here's what's so cool about the way this is written. Look at how these two promised births are presented. They're totally distinct, but they're also deeply connected. John, you see, he's the forerunner, the one who gets everything ready. But Jesus, he's the centerpiece. He's the one the way is being prepared for. It's just a brilliant way to structure the narrative because right away, you know who the main character is, and all the anticipation is focused on him. And this whole chapter is just soaked in this feeling of overwhelming joy and praise. The moment Mary really understands her part in this incredible plan, she just breaks out into this beautiful song of worship. Her song and later Zechariah's song, they just fill the whole story with this sense of awe and gratitude. You know, the promises are about to come true. And that brings us right to chapter 2. This is where all the anticipation, all the prophecy from chapter 1 finally becomes reality. The promises are kept, but, well, not in the way that anyone could have possibly expected. So the story doesn't kick off with a lightning bolt from heaven, but with something very human, an imperial decree from Caesar Augustus, the most powerful man on earth. This census forces Joseph and Mary to travel to Bethlehem, and it's there, in the most humble circumstances imaginable, that Jesus is born and laid in a feeding trough, a manger, because there was no room for them anywhere else. And the grand announcement? It doesn't happen in a palace. It happens in a field, where angels appear to a bunch of shepherds. And this just perfectly sets up a central theme. Think about it. The first people to hear the good news of the Savior's birth are not the powerful, not the religious elites, but ordinary, humble shepherds. They become the very first witnesses, rushing off to see the child and tell everyone what they saw. The point is so clear. This story starts from the ground up. So from the stable, the story shifts. It moves to the religious heart of the nation, the temple in Jerusalem. And it's here that the baby's identity is publicly confirmed by two people who have been faithfully waiting their entire lives for this very moment. So let's meet Simeon and Anna. Simeon is this righteous guy who was promised he wouldn't die before he saw the Messiah. And Anna is an elderly prophetess who practically lived at the temple. When Mary and Joseph bring the baby Jesus in, both Simeon and Anna know, instantly. They just recognize him and they start praising God and telling everyone there who this child is. And having two respected, faithful witnesses, well, that's huge. In a culture that relied so heavily on testimony, getting two separate confirmations right there in the center of Jewish life, that gave this event incredible weight. It was like a formal public declaration. This is the one we've been waiting for. Then after all that drama, the angels, the shepherds, the confirmation in the temple, the chapter just quiets right down. It simply tells us that Jesus grew up, just like any other kid. He got stronger, he became filled with wisdom, and God's favor was on him. It's such a peaceful, grounding way to end such a dramatic beginning. So when you pull back and look at these two chapters together, you see this absolutely incredible narrative arc. You move from these massive prophecies and miraculous promises in chapter 1 all the way down to a quiet, humble fulfillment in a manger in chapter 2, a birth that's announced not to emperors but to shepherds. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about, doesn't it? What does it truly mean for a story of this magnitude, a story that claims to change the entire course of human history, to start not in a palace, not in a place of power, but in the simplest, most humble setting imaginable? It's a theme that's going to echo through the rest of this amazing account. That's all for this explainer. Thanks so much for joining us to break down this powerful story.